Some of these wide receivers on the roster are going to have a lot to prove and plenty of time to do so at the Rauh Bowl. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and you can find me on Twitter, X, at Christian S. Rauh. We got a good show for you today. Happy Monday for you. Sorry this one came out a little bit later on, but we're dealing with a little bit of technical difficulties here at home with some internets, but we are back. No worries about that. We got plenty to talk about on today's show with that being said, and there's a lot that's already going on this Monday, and we're going to make sure you have you covered all throughout the week here on Locked On Kansas State. First, we get to talk about that the wide receiver room is getting smaller and smaller as we are talking, as we're breathing, as we're taking a single breath here. We're getting a smaller wide receiver group here at Kansas State. With that being said, we still have a football game to play in just 10 days, folks. So what's that mean for the wide receivers that are still here? And are we going to see maybe someone break out? I have some ideas, and I want to bring that by you today on this show. As well as we have another player, not really unexpected, declaring for the NFL draft, and we're going to get to that today on this show. But first, I have to start off with another wide receiver entering the transfer portal, and that's wide receiver Keegan Johnson. And I don't know if you want to call this one a surprise, but it definitely hurts. And it's going to be the second wide receiver that really is impactful heading to Kansas State's the third one entering the portal, but with him and Trey Spivey now hitting the transfer portal, this is once again becoming another top priority for Kansas State in the transfer portal. And the portal is not going to be very kind to Kansas State after this week. And let's put it into perspective here. The portal ends on December 28th. The Rauh Bowl is on December 26th. So you really have this week, because then starting next week, you have bowl prep, and you're going to be in Arizona. So you're really the only time to get some of these visits in are going to be this week. So this is a very crucial week. And as of right now, as it stands, there's only one player committed from the transfer portal to Kansas State, and that's Rauh. We talked about him, and he is not in the wide receiver group. He's a defensive player, defensive back or linebacker. We'll see where he decides and where he fits out with this Kansas State Wildcats defense. But back to the wide receiver spot. If you want to get more on Rauh, by the way, check out my latest episode. We did break that down, got a reaction on him committing. But Keegan Johnson finished the season, 29 receptions, 359 yards, 1 touchdown, averaged about 12.5 yards per catch. He did have some injuries, and that's been something that he really had the entire time with Kansas State. He was very, very sought after when we brought him in from Iowa just a few seasons ago. Played 2 seasons with Kansas State, but his injuries really pushed him away from being that receiver that we were hoping he would be. And it's unfortunate because I think he really could have been something fantastic. You know, an Omaha, Nebraska kid. It would have been really cool to see him pan out here at Kansas State. But he enters the portal for the second time in his collegiate career. Again, he entered it after the 2023 season when he left Iowa Hawkeyes and come over from Kansas State. And now he's going to enter it one more time. I think he has one more year of eligibility left. So Keegan Johnson now out of the way for Kansas State. Trey Spivey is now no longer with the team. He entered the portal. He's getting a lot of offers from Big 12 schools. So we might be seeing him in conference play next season. And one of the biggest ones that I have seen as of late, and I don't know if it's a crystal ball or just a prediction or whatnot, but I've seen that Iowa State has been leading the charge for a potential landing spot for Trey Spivey. So maybe we will see him a lot sooner than we expect, week 0 in Dublin, Ireland against Iowa State. However, where we sit right now, Jace Brown is still on the roster. Jace Brown, obvious wide receiver number 1. He came out with a tweet just the other day. He put a Bible verse up and had 4 pictures on his tweet, all in his Kansas State uniform. What it sounds like, that's a good sign of him staying. Not sure if that is his official word of saying he's going to stay with Kansas State or just some cryptic kind of tweets. He's had a couple of those in the past. But regardless, it sounds like he's staying put. So hopefully that's a good sign for Kansas State's wide receiver. But he can't be it all. Even though he has a great relationship with Avery Johnson, he cannot be the only number one wide receiver out there. He can't be the only great wide receiver out there, I should say. And hopefully in the portal, we can find somebody that can challenge Jace for that wide receiver one. And that's only going to make this team better. If you're heading into the season and you guarantee know that Jace Brown is going to be your number one wide receiver one, that's not the greatest thing in the world. Not taking anything away from Jace, by the way, in this case. I'm not. But what I'm saying is a good, healthy competition in spring ball is always good for every aspect of the team, especially a wide receiver group who right now is having some issues with depth. Heading into the transfer portal, heading into the second week, we've had multiple visits from wide receivers, and it looks like, as of right now, that it seems like Kansas State is going to want to try and get 3 out of the portal. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to happen. It would be really cool if that did, but I'm not sure if you're going to get that. It seems like right now the top 3 that are likely to go to Kansas State are the following. Isaiah Johnson, who is Michigan State wide receiver. There was a visit from him over the weekend. According to some sources and some message boards, it looks like he is leading towards Kansas State in a good way. Like, hopefully there's some good signs that he is happy with Kansas State, but also Kansas is in the picture. And I think there's other schools as well. So nothing's a sure thing on this case. Jalen Moss from Fresno State, sounds like he's out of the books. He was offered, but he was never visited. Sounds like he's no longer going to be one of those receivers. So it looks like Isaiah Johnson's one of them. Another one would be Isaiah Hunter from Cal. Hopefully there's a case, but there's a lot of offers on the table for Hunter. Kansas State is one of them. It sounds like Kansas State's still staying in the picture, trying to stick around. Hopefully that can mean good things for Kansas State, because they need all the help they can get. And lastly, Jaron Tibbs from Purdue. He does have a visit coming up this week, so that could hopefully mean good things moving forward. Tibbs, although played on one of the worst teams in college football this past season, has a lot of potential. I said that on one of my past shows. I think he could be a really good piece if he had the opportunity to do so. And if you are looking to make an opportunity at a Power 4 school and you're a wide receiver in the portal right now, what better spot than with Avery Johnson with this wide receiver group? Because there is not a lot of proven talent on this team, at least in the wide receiver group. There is a lot of talent, don't get me wrong, but at the Power 4 level, really the only proven talent is Jace Brown. So if you come in the portal and you get ready to work, there is a prime spot for you to be able to get a lot of reps, a lot of targets, which should turn into a lot of yards, a lot of good things on the stat sheet. You try to make that next level. If you're playing at the Power 4 level, you can't tell me your next step, your next dream isn't to try and make the NFL, because I know it is. Doing something like that, playing at Kansas State, what a great time to do it, especially when the need for wide receiver is so huge. And you look at this depth chart moving forward right now, there's a message board out on On3. And go ahead, I'm going to shout out On3 once again, because they're killing it over here on their message board. And I'd recommend you guys get a subscription and check it out. They have one about talking about the race to 105 and how they talk about the depth chart. And they broke down every single position. I'm not going to give it away fully, but just checking out some of them. Right now, it looks like there's about 15 wide receivers that are sitting on the roster. There's going to be some cuts. There's no doubt about it. And most of them are freshmen on there. So you're not going to get rid of a lot of freshmen. But looking at Jace Brown, who's going to be a junior this coming season, then you have a couple other players on this roster. They're going to have to step up. Some of these freshmen are just coming in the recruiting class. You're not going to be able to see them at least till next season in spring ball. So what does that mean for the bowl game heading out December 26th? These 15 receivers on the roster right now, not every single one of them are going to be able to play. Now, some of the red shirts that were redshirted this past season can play if they're healthy and ready to go. That doesn't count against their redshirt eligibility in bowl season. That's the cool thing about bowl season. And we're going to get to that in just a minute. But what I want to break down is, out of these receivers left on the depth chart, who needs to step up and who has a great shot of stepping up to maybe prove that they're ready for a next step at taking a bigger responsibility with Kansas State in 2025, and how the Rate Bowl can help them prove just that. We're going to get to that and so much more here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, let's talk to you about FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. The NFL playoffs are getting closer and closer. I don't know if you watched the games this past Sunday, but there were some really good ones out. There's a doubleheader for Monday Night Football getting ready to go tonight. So get your bets in there. You have plenty of time. And if you are late, if you're listening to this during the games, guess what? You can do it in live. You can place a bet while the games are going on live. If you get a feeling that maybe Desmond Ridder is having a comeback game against his former team, the Atlanta Falcons, what a good time to place a bet in and say you think that he's going to go ahead and get that upset. But if not, if you have that hunch in the middle of a game, as I mentioned, you can check out the latest stats, view live by play, and so much more on the same page where you place those same bets. No need to bounce around. You can do it all in one spot and keep your focus on the game. So visit FanDuel.com to join today. And again, you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that very first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make FanDuel your stop. It's an official sportsbook of the NFL. And welcome on back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm Christian Rauh. We just talked about how Keegan Johnson has hit the transfer portal. Right now, we're sitting at 15 players in the transfer portal. 3 of them are wide receivers, Trey Spivey and Keegan Johnson leading the way for that one on the impact that's going to mean for Kansas State heading into 2025. Jace Brown is going to lead the way. It sounds like he's staying put. That's not a guarantee. We haven't heard any guarantees from him yet. But what it sounds like, what it feels like, what we're seeing, right? The taste test, the eye test, however you want to call it, it sounds like he's staying put. And why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he want to right now? With the way that this wide receiver group looks like, he's going to be the guy. If there was any doubts that last year he wasn't the guy, it's definitely going to be the case this year heading into 2025 based on how this wide receiver group looks like. But with that being said, there's still a football game to play in 10 days. The Rauh Bowl, December 26th against Rutgers. You still got to put out some wide receivers. You still got to play this game, and you still want to obviously prove that you can be a great football team moving into 2025. There's so much momentum after this season with National Signing Day, and the transfer portal's kind of slowed that down a little bit because they haven't had so much commitments. A lot of people leaving the portal, only one guy coming in. But what a great way to pick that momentum back up with a bowl win and moving to 9 wins on the season after beating a Big Ten team, regardless if it's Rutgers or not. Rutgers is a good football team. They're not the top name in the Big Ten by any means. You could probably put them towards the bottom if you're going to talk about names. But they're a great football team. They're coached well. They kind of play just like Kansas State in the aspects of their running game. And you get a win against the Big Ten team, one of those Power 2 conferences they like to call. That's bragging rights, no matter who it is, regardless of the case. And I'm sure when there's some Big 12 SEC bowl game matchups, it's going to be the same way when we see that moving on in bowl season this year. But the biggest priority and the biggest concern, I guess you have to say, heading into this bowl week is not what we're going to see from Avery Johnson, not what we're going to see from the running back crew, because we have one of their players leaving for the NFL draft, which you're going to get to in just a moment, or not what we're going to see from the play calling, because we had questions about what Connor Riley's going to do and if there's going to be some changes maybe after the bowl game. All of those are valid concerns, don't get me wrong, and I want to see what happens there, and we're going to have plenty to talk about once this game's over. And we're going to go live once that game's over as well. We're going to be right on here on Locked On Kansas State, so be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit like, comment below, join the conversation as well, because I love hearing from all of you, and give me some ideas to talk about. I'd love to bring it up on this show, because we have plenty to talk about. We're going to talk about everything with college football, men's basketball team, women's basketball team. We're going to get some baseball content out when the spring starts and more. And it's not just limited to those, but that's mainly where we're going to go with this show. But with that being said, the wide receiver group is limited. And I think for the last 14 minutes, I've said that quite enough, but there's still plenty to talk about with this show. Sterling Lockett is a guy that I feel has a chance to really break out at the Rauh Bowl. And if you've heard his name and you heard his last name, they should ring bells around, right? A Lockett, another Lockett with Kansas State, sophomore wide receiver, 5'10", 170. He hasn't had a good chance to really show anything this season. He's been buried in the depth chart, if you will. Only had one attempt on a punt return, went 10 yards. and then only had one attempt on a kickoff, 111 yards. Played some special teams. With the departures of guys like Keegan Johnson, Dante Cephas, who leaves in the graduation, we see Trey Spivey out of the way. A perfect time for a guy like Sterling Lockett to make a huge impact at the Rauh Bowl. I think it would be a fantastic way to prove that he is exactly what they need moving forward in the 2025. He screams to be he screams to have the profile of a slot wide receiver and could be an elite slot wide receiver. And that's something they could definitely use, having a guy like Jace Brown on the outside who can have those deep threats. Have a guy like Sterling Lockett. He wakes up, proves in the Rauh Bowl that he can be a top slot wide receiver. Maybe not have to worry about moving a guy like Dylan Edwards, who you want to be your top running back in 2025, not moving him out into the slot and packages, having a guy that you can focus like Sterling Lockett instead. I mean, that sounds great. And I think that's something that hopefully that can take off. There's a lot of other players on here that you could hopefully hope that would do some things as well for Kansas State. But the biggest name to me was Lockett. And I don't think it's just because his last name is Kansas State royalty, if you will. I don't think that's the case. I think he has a great profile to be a fantastic slot receiver in college football. I think we're going to see some really good things out of him, and hopefully that's the case. Hopefully we do see some things out of him. The only upperclassman left on this depth chart that really hasn't seen a lot of playing time as well, and I know there were some injuries in the past with him, is Quentin Rice, and we didn't see a lot from him this year as well after transferring over from BYU. He's going to be heading into his senior season. He walked on to Kansas State. This could be a good, if he's healthy, and I actually don't know if he's not healthy or not because we haven't heard much from him this season. But if he is healthy and able to play in this Rauh Bowl, you know, the roster size moving to 105, the players it's going to impact first and foremost is going to be those walk-on players. A guy like Quentin Rice, who's going to be entering his final year in college football, what a perfect time for him to try and step up and try to make a role on this team. So my eyes is going to be glued on what happens with the wide receiver portion, with the exception of Jace Brown, because we know what we got from Brown. And I do think you still need to feed him. There's no doubt about it, because once the game's over, there's still 2 more days in the portal. So you can't get a guy like Jace Brown upset after the bowl game, especially a guy who's teetering on the edge. At least we're not sure of what's going to happen with Jace Brown heading into 2025. But you got to make sure he's happy. But after that, you got to find who's your, as of right now, you know, minus the people in the portal, minus the people coming in your freshman class, who can be a wide receiver 2 or 3 on this team? Who could make an impact on this team if that happens? And right now, I'm leaning toward a guy like Sterling Lockett, and I really do think that he can make that type of step forward. Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully we find that from him at the Rauh Bowl against Rutgers, December 26th in Arizona. If you haven't checked it out yet, if you haven't gone down to or buy your tickets, there's some nice packages on K-State Online. Check that out on KansasStateAthletics.com, I should say. And it's just a really good, it's going to be really fun. I'm going to try and make it down there myself. No promises. We'll see how it goes. I got a little one, so it's always tough trying to find travel and things around there. But regardless, we will have you covered here at Locked On Kansas State. Whether I'm at the game or I'm sitting here, we'll be right on the screen covering right after the game live, and hopefully you join me in the conversation. We're going to start doing some more live shows as well, not just these breakdowns Monday through Friday. We'll be having you more than one show now that we're starting to get a little bit of traction, starting to get a little bit more comfortable in the process, and especially since we're entering conference play in basketball. We're going to have plenty covered for you here on Locked On Kansas State. But with that being said, we got one more player to say goodbye to, and this one's a tough one because he had such a huge legacy at Kansas State. We're going to get to that in our final segment here on Locked On Kansas State. Well, it's that time of year again. The college football playoffs are back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoffs begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup. SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern, so don't miss a moment of the action. Watch college football playoffs presented by Allstate live on TNT True TV, TBS, and Max. And let's finish off this episode here of Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast. And thank you for being an everydayer. If you're joining, I'm starting to see a lot of traffic here now. I'd love to hear some more comments from you. But while you're there, hit like, hit subscribe, ring that bell so you can hear episodes or see where you're at. And if you're listening on the podcast form, do me a favor and give me 5 stars. Give this show 5 stars wherever you're listening. It really helps the algorithm. It helps branch out to more Kansas State fans so everyone else can hear it as well. And I'd love if you do that for me. So thank you so much for that. But let's get into our final segment today. And we're going to talk about DJ Giddens declaring for the NFL draft, makes it the second player joining Jacob Parrish to join the NFL draft out of Kansas State for this coming season. When we get to April, the middle of April, we're going to hear both Jacob Parrish and DJ Giddens' name be answered. But with that being said, Giddens will not be participating in the bowl game. He will forego his final year of eligibility at Kansas State to head to the NFL draft. I think it's going to be a great decision for him. And, selfishly, I would have loved to see him play one more game at the Rauh Bowl. I know Connor Beebe did that last year. It helped his draft stock. It's a different position group, right? Running backs, they get talked about and they're hurt for their mileage. That's one of their biggest things that gets taken from them is how much workload they had to use in college and how that can affect them in the NFL because they're always worried about longevity with the running back position. And the chase to getting to your second contract in the NFL is a real thing. And I hope DJ Giddens can do that and step up. Hopefully he can find a good spot to land where he's not battling to get off the practice squad because I think he can be an immediate impact. I think this is a guy that should be a guy that plays on Sundays. If he goes to the wrong team, might get in trouble. I think the same with Parrish, by the way, too. I just feel like that's just how they sit. But he's a guy that I think can play on Sundays and have a fantastic job at doing so. I think right off the bat, as a rookie, he's a guy that could be a running back too. I really do. And I'm not just saying that again with the whole, bias. I think he's just a great running back. He's not afraid to put his head down, run between the guards, run outside the tackles. Overall, just a very good player at the game in the backfield. Another local guy, Junction City, Kansas. This past season, 205 carries for over 1,300 yards and 7 touchdowns, averaged over 6 yards per carry. I mean, he really had a great season at Kansas State. On his career, he had over 3,000 yards rushing, 23 touchdowns, and averaged 6 yards a carry with his rushing. That doesn't even add the receiving stats where she was nearly 700 yards receiving. Overall, between rushing and receiving was very close to 4,000 all-purpose yards, if you will, between rushing and receiving on his career. What a great career from DJ Giddens. I wish him nothing but the best. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time we see him. I'm sure he's going to be back on campus. We might even see him next year on the sidelines. Who knows? But it will be as an NFL player, not as a Kansas State Wildcat, at least in uniform-wise. Always a Wildcat, DJ Giddens is going to be. But, I mean, what an incredible career. 27 total touchdowns between rushing and receiving. 164 points scored. I know some of that's up there in the all-time Kansas State records. I know he's up there as some of the best that has ever played this position and ever played this game for Kansas State. So good luck to him. I really hope all the best things in the world for him. And I can't wait to watch you on Sundays. And if you get drafted to the right spot, you guarantee I'm going to put you on my dynasty team for fantasy. No doubt about it. And I hope that's the case. That's going to wrap it up for this episode here at Locked On Kansas State. We got more to cover. We got plenty coming up this week. Tomorrow, we're going to cover and preview the men's basketball game against Drake. Wildcat Classic's going to be tomorrow night. We're going to have you covered on this one. We got plenty to talk about with the women's squad, how they are continue to be disrespected. I don't care. I feel like I might be in the minority in this one, but I got a bone to pick with the AP polls. We're going to cover that tomorrow. And why I do have some ways that they can improve as well. We're going to get to that. And talk about ways that this improve. This might be the best women's basketball team that Kansas State's ever seen. Well, I'm going to tell you how they can win a natty. We're going to get to that tomorrow. And we're still got plenty more to talk about with the transfer portal because that's not going away, at least for the next 2 weeks, even after the Rauh Bowl for a couple days, really for the rest of the year. For 2024, it's all transfer portal talk with football, but we're going to make sure we squeak in all the other things as well because we have plenty of Wildcat talk, plenty of Wildcat stuff to talk about, and portal chatter isn't going away as well. But until then, please like the video, please subscribe. And until then, this has been Locked On Kansas State.